Hello. I love the experience of reading a historical novel that completely immerses me in a certain period of the past, but also introduces me to fascinating figures from history who I was previously unaware of. So, alongside the sense of feeling like I've lived with them throughout their lives, I can now go and research and find out more about their lives and what facts can be known about them. So just recently, I read The Two Roberts by Damian Barr, and this is a love story. It's a depiction of a nation in the lead up to World War II and of the art scene in the UK in the mid 20th century. And I just completely fell for this book and this story, which, as the title suggests, is about two individuals named Robert. So there is Bobby McBride and there is Robert Colquhoun, and they have many similarities in some ways, that they're both from Scotland, from more working class backgrounds. They are both artists and both went to the Glasgow School of Arts where they first met. They are both gay, but they also have a lot of aspects of their lives which are very different from each other. And I was nervous at first reading this book that, oh, am I going to be able to distinguish between the two Roberts, since they're both called Robert, but he distinguishes them very much from each other quite early on in the book, where Bobby, he is very extroverted, very rambunctious. He is also very domestically inclined. He's often cooking meals for them, some that sound quite terrifying, like cow's head soup, which really horrifies me. And then there is Robert, who is much more introverted, much more reserved and work focused. And they meet at this school, but this isn't a kind of love at first sight. There's a lot of tension in their relationships and kind of tentative steps around each other because, of course, at this time, sexual acts between men, between same-sex couples was illegal and was punishable by imprisonment. And so when they first meet in the 1930s at the Glasgow School of Art, they're very tentative in forming their connection with each other, but they're also very different personalities, and that could be quite abrasive. And there's professional and artistic rivalry between them as well, but they are also very intrigued by each other, and they do form this very tender connection with each other. They move in with each other living in Glasgow, kind of out of economic necessity at first, and then they develop such a strong romantic and professional connection with one another, and how this traces their lives over a period of about 30 years is so gripping and involving. And it's tricky with historical fiction about how much you should read about and know about the facts or the kind of architecture of what can be known about this history before going into reading the fiction. And just last week, I talked about another historical novel, which I very much advised going and reading about this historical figure before reading this novel, because it kind of completely plunges you into the middle of their life. But with the two Roberts, I would definitely say, do not read about them too much before going into reading this book, which I didn't do, and I was glad I didn't, because I didn't know what happened in the lives of these two historical figures, other than that they kind of fell a bit into obscurity, because otherwise they would would have been fairly well known, but I didn't. And Damian Barr, up until he started researching and writing this novel, knew nothing about these two individuals' lives either, even though Damian Barr is also a gay man from Scotland, and he had never heard of them before. So I knew that, they didn't go on to become mega successful artists in the way that some other of their contemporaries and some of their associates at the time, but yeah, all I knew was what was told in this novel, and so it was a process of discovery, following their development from their university years up until their early success and immersion in the art scene at that time, and it was so moving following this journey, and the way that Damian Barr carries the reader on this journey. The narrative choices I think he makes are very smart, because at first the reader is very close to both of these individuals, following them in their burgeoning relationship and burgeoning careers. But as the story goes on, the narrative kind of shifts and changes a bit, where they're a bit more at a distance. We learn more about their lives from the later parts of their lives, from letters that both they write about accounts of people that observe them both in their home and out on the scene together, and so through this we learn about their fates and what ultimately happens to this couple. And I found it such an emotionally involving journey, but also a really fascinating, different look at this midpoint of the 20th century and the lead up to World War II, and the tensions that of knowing that they were both at an age when they were definitely going to be drafted into it. Although Bobby, he suffered from a lot of issues to do with his health and issues to do with his chest, whereas Robert, he did have to go and enlist, and the separation that they feel from each other, that and the interruption in his career, it was terrifying, but also how they are witnessing transformations both in the country and on the continent, because they get a special grant to be able to go to the continent to study art, and how they are witnessing the changes around them is terrifying, but also how it shows their lives as gay men at that time. And they meet a special mentor who kind of teaches them, especially Bobby, about the scene at the time, and in special locations where you can go to have sexual rendezvous with other men, but also experience the joy and vibrancy of the gay culture at the time, which of course, as I said, had to all remain very much underground. And the descriptions of encounters they have, there's naturally a lot of fear at the time, and there's a line in the book where he remarks that fear is a shared language, where people who are being persecuted, being taken advantage of, there's a recognition there in each other, but there's also so much joy and excitement to gay life, to this sort of underground existence that is going on at the time. And the way that Damian Barr portrays this duality of this period of time in history, I think is So well done. The two Roberts have a relationship with each other, but they also freely have sexual encounters with other men, sometimes together and sometimes separately, and how they have this collection of buttons of the men that they encounter that are these kind of souvenirs of these sexual encounters, which grows into a very large jar filled with buttons of these men that they meet over time. And I just love this detail and this jar of buttons that they carry with them over the decades. And when the Roberts first come to London, I was inspired to go to the location where they first journeyed to during this time, since I live here. So I'll show you a clip of that. Here I am in Trafalgar Square, where the two Roberts come to when they first arrive in London down from Scotland. And it's something I so love about reading novels that happen to have scenes which are set in the city, that I can come see these physical locations for myself and imagine these characters here and these historical figures here. And it makes me reflect on my own time first arriving in London and my excitement about coming to Trafalgar Square for the very first time. Now, when the two Roberts first arrive, they come down from Charing Cross Road, which is, of course, famous for its bookshops, although sadly these days a lot of those bookshops have been replaced by things like bubble tea shops. And they come to Trafalgar Square and they want to go into the National Gallery, but they happen to see a bus which is going to the Tate Millbank, as it was called in those days, and it's called the Tate Britain now, and that's just down the river from here. And Bobby is so excited to go there because there's a painting, Van Gogh's Sunflowers, which he can't wait to see. Now, this painting was acquired by the Tate Gallery, as it was called in those days, in the 1920s, and it was moved here behind me to the National Gallery in the 1960s. So although they go to see it in the Tate Britain, I need to go into the National Gallery here to see it for myself. A painting which these two historical figures went to see for the very first time about 90 or 100 years ago. The gallery is starting to think about closing for the day, but the sunflowers don't care if they've got an audience or not. They blaze off the wall, somehow lit from behind or within. Do you think they're real? Robert wonders, his eyes roving from petal to petal, like a bee unpicking every brushstroke, every decision. He sticks the tip of his tongue out between his lips, the way he only does when he's lost in something. He remembers the sunflowers his father grew up the side of his aviary, so tall they peeked out over the top, the one and only non-edible plant he permitted. I mean, do you think he drew them from life, or do you think he just made them up? Bobby thinks for a moment, recalls their long afternoons in the life room and Fleming's endless command, not merely to look, but to see. He shrugs. I don't know, but they're here now. I think he was looking right at them, like we are now, says Robert, leaning forward and pointing to a big tufty one in the middle. They look hot, like the sun's still in them. Aye, ponders Bobby, leaning forward too, suddenly desperate to run his hand across the rough salt glaze of the jug. And the yellows. I want to find a screaming kind of yellow, and see that green? Round the jug, on the table. That's the bones. It's nothing without that. Robert sits back and nods. The green, he says, surprised. I see it. Can you believe we're really here? Bobby asks, nudging almost perceptibly along the bench. And so it was great going to view this piece of art in person, which of course I've seen Van Gogh's Sunflowers before, but looking at it this time on this visit, it was like I was seeing it through Bobby's eyes and in this very crucial stage of their artistic development. And it's something else that I really appreciated about this novel, how Damian Barr portrays the development of them as artists. They are both artists at this time, but they have very different focus to their subjects. So Bobby he focuses a lot more on still lives, and Robert depicts a lot more figures, often these kind of shadowy, abstract figures, and so they have very different subject matter and approaches to their arts, but there's also collaboration there, and free movement between them as they are working on different pieces of art individually and together as a couple, but also how they are so immersed in the art scene at the time, so that they're very close to the artist Francis Bacon, who was early on in his career, but they also have encounters and a friendship with the writer Elizabeth Smart. But then there are also tensions within this culture as well. They are not so fond of the Bloomsbury group of the time and different figures in that group, and Vanessa Bell, but the Bloomsbury group also isn't all that fond of them and their historical records of remarks that are made about them. And so there are these kind of clashes and tensions within the art scene. And of course, I'm not hugely familiar with this period of time, but I did recognize a number of different names, and it felt so lively and fun being completely immersed in this art scene at the time. And so yeah, I just loved following this, but also found it so heart-wrenching following the journey of these two individuals. And it feels like such a shame that they've kind of just gone mostly into obscurity, but it's also really exciting that both this novel and some recent exhibits of their paintings and studies of these different artists, that they have been brought back to life, and that we can now admire them as Scottish working class artists of the time, and who had such a unique perspective to give at the time, and how this in turn gives a really different view of this history, which I've spent a lot of time studying and reading about British 20th century British history and movements in writing and art, but I feel like I've never got one like this before, and so I'm so glad that this novel has immersed me in the journey of these two individuals who really there's a lot about their lives, which their personal lives and their professional lives, which we can't know because they're especially to do with their erotic encounters and their relationship with each other, that there couldn't exist any documents of this at the time because it was incriminating. If it had been found, it could be used against them in court and they could have gone to jail. And so it feels really necessary that there can be very sympathetic authors like Damian Barr that can bring their stories to life, to fictionally recreate their lives and kind of fill in the gaps in this imaginative way, because not everything can be known about their history and their lives, but there are still lots of documents. There are still lots of their paintings, which now I'm really excited to go and explore and find out a lot more about. So thank you for watching me discuss this novel, and I would love to hear if you have read this or if you're interested in reading it now. I can also highly recommend Damian Barr's previous novel, which is called You Will Be Safe Here, which is in a very different context, but is also looking at war in the 20th century, this time the Second Boer Wars, and but also gay life through that period and in a time much later, and which is also a really excellent novel. But yeah, I really highly recommend the two Roberts. But for now, I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye bye.